People stuck in history, time walkers. Have you ever wondered about our kind? We do exist. And so, I might as well make my time worthwhile. We exist in the timeline, recording these events of history, so that I may share them with you present walkers. Have you ever wondered about human traditions? Where do they stem? Why do they continue? What roots bury themselves into our ground? Let me divulge secrets of history with you. It's not a tale for the weak, but a tale for the bold. A tale from previous eras that marks itself upon today. Today, an anniversary of Friday the 13th. Have you ever wondered where it comes from? Well, if you have the heart, I invite you to stay a little longer. Watch this moment of history and listen to my tale, to its lore of ancient times, of a religion, of the Templar Knights, and of curses. If you be so bold, listen to my tale. This sword, a memoir from the older days, times in which my brother served the Templar ways, dressed in their black and white cloaks, fashioned with the Red Cross. Who knew how many of their lives would have to be lost? I remember that cool autumn season, just as if it were yesterday. Living in the timeline, recording each moment as it goes by. It was in that moment that I knew forever would we be changed by what would ensue. The number 13, some call it lucky, others say it's cursed from the depths of hell. All in all, settle down gently, for this tale I shall tell. If you knew what I know, would you want to know more? So you decided to stay? Good. I like a brave soul. I suppose I will start my story from the very beginning. In the year 1118, the Order of the Templar Knights was established by a man named Hugh de Payans. A little more than a decade later, in 1129, it was formally endorsed by the Catholic Church. Then, in 1139, Pope Innocent II decided that these knights should be afforded special privileges, which included tax exemptions and the ability to disobey any authority that wasn't that of the Pope. For 2 centuries, the Knights held a great influence over most of Europe and part of the Middle East, for they combined religious organization with military powers. They were tasked with protecting pilgrims as they made their journey to the Holy Land, otherwise known as Jerusalem. They also fought in a great many crusades which helped establish the influence of the Catholic Church. They safeguarded treasures of monarchs in the church and as well as established themselves as a financial entity as they made chapters all throughout Western Europe. They say money is the root of all evil, and greed is its twin. What do you believe? Is this humanity's greatest sin? At the time, France had a king, King Philip IV. He was an interesting man. He liked money. He liked having money. But somehow he always managed to have this money slip through his fingertips like melted butter. He owed a great many debts to a great many people, and one organization he ended up having a debt to was that of the Knights Templar. You see, the Knights Templar could act as a bank to monarchs, giving them a loan but expecting these dues to be returned within time. Months passed and passed and passed and went, and King Philip IV hadn't paid his dues, and so the Knights Templar reminded the king that he had a debt to pay. As you can assume, King Philip IV did not like this because he couldn't have his way. For what authority likes to be reminded of what they must do? On Friday, October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV sent arrest warrants for the Knights Templar, including their treasurer and Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. This wouldn't be the first time that the King Philip IV made aggressive attempts to silence those who spoke against him. He previously attacked the Lombards, a rich banking group, as well as the Jews of France, who held prominent financial roles due to the segregation promoted by the Catholic Church. Except this time was different. Not only was he attacking the sacred order of the Templar Knights, nay, he picked the perfect moment in time to do so. You see, at this moment in time, 1307, witch hunts and witch trials were beginning to ooze and fester throughout Europe, and the attacks against the heretics, those who choose, had already commenced. The stage in which the Templar Knights were arrested was preset by the fear-mongering that was used as a method of control. In order to write these warrants of arrest, French King Philip IV had to give a reason, and so he said that these knights had committed devious, dark deeds. He said that they had eaten babies, conspired with Satan himself, urinated and spitted on the cross, committed acts of heresy and black magic, and even engaged in unorthodox sexual practices. Eventually, word took the wind and reached the Pope, Pope Clement V. The Pope was mortified and shocked. How could his sacred knights do such things? And so, he stripped them of his power and gave the Templars power to another organization known as the Knights Hospitaller. But this was not before King Philip IV seized some of the money from the Knights Templar and took charge over their lands. The knights were thrown in dark, dim, and cold cells. Their bodies was ravaged by hunger, as they were only given bits and crumbs of bread. They were wrecked by dehydration, as they were often not given water either. Not only that, but most of the knights were put under torturous conditions. These included the strappado, in which one's arms are put behind their back, and they are suspended into the air. Other knights had their hands tied so the blood would pool at the fingertips. Others were committed to the rack, which would pull one's body. And a few had their hands and feet dipped in oil and placed over an open flame. As one can suspect, the confessions soon came rolling in. It only took 2 weeks for the knights to confess to deeds they never did. However, some recanted their statements, but this was not allowed at this time period, for why would a man originally to confess to such deeds he didn't do? Nah, Most knights were burned at the stake, others died in captivity, and that is where this story turns dark. It's important to note that the time period and the place in which the knights were arrested followed a Roman system as opposed to a customary system. In this Roman system, the court was tasked with deciding the evidence of those accused. Ultimately, there was no jury, and the court officials were in charge of passing guilt or innocence. Evidence could come in two forms. Either two male witnesses had to come forth to proclaim the guilt or the innocence of those accused, or a confession had to be obtained. Torture was permitted because confession was considered the gold standard. Now, do you remember a name I said earlier? Jacques de Molay. This is an important name, and it should be emboldened as I say my story. This man was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and it was decided by King Philip IV that he shall be publicly executed as to give warning to any who tried to follow in his footsteps. And so, in the spring of 1314, Jacques de Molay was tied to the stake, and as the flames that would engulf his body were being lit, he proclaimed he had something to say. Yet these words that met the wind were not grievances, they were not shame, they were not a recantation, and they were not any goodbyes to loved ones. Nay, they were curses spoken from his very lips. As the fire was lit, he spoke a curse. He said that Pope Clement V and King Philip IV shall die before that year was over. And what followed next was that his shrieks and cries filled the air. As he died, a living man turned to burned corpse. 33 days after the death of Jacques de Molay, Pope Clement V fell ill. A mysterious and sudden disease overtook his body, and he died soon thereafter. 7 months after the death of the Pope, the King Philip IV, was out hunting. He was up upon his horse when he was struck with a stroke, fell, and was proclaimed dead. Now, because the curses came true, the day that's associated with the arrest of the Knights Templar and that of Jacques de Molay, Friday the 13th, October 1307, became associated with a day of bad luck and black magic. And that is why Friday the 13th has such ominous, dark, and spooky associations. That rests my tale.